We have our second program within the Marana Women's Network, and we're super excited to have you all here. We hope to have some more women joining as we get started, but I just want to turn the mic over to Dario for him to introduce himself and let us know a little bit about Brighter Bridges and what you guys do.
Thanks, Faye. Hey, everyone. This is Dario from a company called Brighter. We work, I still have people joining, so I'll be adding. So Brighter was born as a magazine and then turned into a research company focused on showcasing kind of innovation and opportunities across what we call underserved markets. And by underserved markets, we simply identify those regions and economies that lack that's adequate supply of information to really project what is happening in these in these locations when it comes to business and investment opportunities. We've quickly kind of established a brand by way of producing a lot of content and freely available data that are now being used by anyone from the bank to governments all around the world and corporates and VCs. And we tend to have a very tight relation with what we call ecosystem builders and startups and SMEs, right? And the idea is to really try to have, to create that bridge between, the continent and the rest of the world by, well, actually not only focus on Africa, but, Africa has been our first continent and region of interest, and where we've developed a network, where we've developed a kind of familiarity and expertise when it comes to segmenting, collecting and segmenting the data. The reason why I'm here is, Brighter has done quite a lot of work on, literally building data sets and building presentations and building reports around what is happening across dozens of sectors, across different countries in terms of investment, in terms of simply like market dynamics. So we've done a lot of industry reports that are freely available. And finally, what we've done over the last couple of years has been developing a digital tool that is called the Brighter Intelligence, which is a largely free tool and that can be used for like pipeline development or scouting competitors or understanding, how the market works across the continent and other regions, even though like we've mainly focused our data on the continent. Can you hear me? Yeah, because it says, okay, cool. Okay, cool.
Yes, I'm getting you.
Super. Okay, cool. All right, so what I'm planning to do today is to show you a bit of the latest work that we've been doing, which is an investment report that kind of takes a look at the state of the ecosystem and the state of state of funding across Africa, and it's our latest publication, which means it gathers, effectively sums up quite a lot of work that we've been doing in the background, when it comes to understanding how investment flows are going across Africa and who is investing in which one are the sectors that are being explored the most. So if you give me 2 seconds, I'll pick up the report because I've come unprepared and I didn't prepare it here, but 2 minutes. No, actually less, it's here. In the meantime, like we can actually make it a bit, quite dynamic. If you have any questions, just please, I guess, just interrupt me. And especially clarification around some data, feel free.
Yeah, I wonder if any of the women here have heard of Brighter before, seen your reports. If anyone's heard of Brighter and Dario's work, can you raise your hand so we know? See if anyone raises their hand.
Good.
Cool. It looks like no one has seen it, so it's the first time for everyone.
Fabulous. Okay, cool. So there's no duplication of of explanation, right? So this will kind of give you a flavor, like how, you know, the content that we've been producing and how we've been working, and then, you know, I hope this will lead to a bunch of questions around, you know, how to seek support. But also I would love to just in general learn more about, you know, what work each of you does, so we can see also maybe by way of presenting some of the work and the research and data that we've produced, how this could help. Let's say like the bottom line of this is also how to, you know, how research can be important and how understanding the market can be important, you know, when it comes to building a business or a brand or a project. So here is I'll just spend probably 10-15 minutes on this, and probably be good. No, if you interrupt me if it's too much, you let me know if I can go ahead, if I can go on, right? All right, so first, in order to do this report, you know, as you, I think, well know, one of the problem on accessing information on the continent is the fact that information isn't online. So you often need to actually go to the, you know, to the actual source of information in order to put them then onto a spreadsheet, right? So what we did for this report was actually talking to the investor community, which Brighter has been working with over the past few years. And you can see here, there's a number of familiar faces and quite familiar names in terms of foundation, in terms of VCs, in terms of, you know, 212 Founders is actually in Morocco. You know, is it in Marrakesh, or is it? Yeah, no, it's in Casablanca.
In Casa or Rabat? Casa, I think.
And but we have, you know, we've been looking at investors that are based in Africa, investors that are based outside of Africa, and then looking into the continent, right? So in order to build this report, we wanted to be very clear about the fact that we'd want to collaborate with what we call the gatekeepers, right? The people who hold the information, right? So here's the I guess the summary infographic, and the whole idea behind this is to actually, you know, introduce how we've gone about doing this report. When you do funding analysis, and I think this is very important also to understand when one considers raising funding, there's quite a bit that isn't clear for two reasons. Maybe the information around the fundraising state isn't detailed, right? And so you don't really understand like what type of funding has gone into companies. And then secondly is some degree of confidentiality, right? And so you don't have access to specific information. And so with this report, we actually try to dissect all, you know, some of this issue by using colors effectively and making it very easy to for people to understand. As you can see here, we have a bulk figure, which is the $2.4 billion that we've identified as the bare minimum of funding that has been raised across the continent. It's very likely to be more. This was the funding that we managed to identify. So this is not the total figure. This is the total figure based on the information that was available to Brighter. Okay, and the way we've subdivided this was between the disclosed deals, the undisclosed deals, and the merger and acquisitions. We don't really count as venture capital investment, but count kind of separately because they also come in at a different stage in company development, right? And also we looked at, you know, we tried to divide, can you see my pointer? Yeah. So we tried to divide also the funding history over the past 5 years, and also to single out all those investment that might have actually driven the numbers up, but they actually still represent some sort of like outlier in the space. Let me just like zoom in. And why do I say this? Because obviously there is a limited pool of funding that is available to entrepreneurs across Africa, and the usual ticket size range is fairly limited. But then you have some global companies that have been expanding across the continent and have been raising, you know, over like $90 million in single deals, right? And so this is likely to skew your understanding and your perception of how the funding opportunity is across the continent, right? And this is why we found important, like to, we thought it'd be important to divide and subsegment, the funding that actually went, in average size deals, from the funding that, that went into companies that raise what we call as mega deals, right? As you can see, funding has increased over the course of the years. There has been a larger number of very high profile acquisitions, right? These are all acquisitions that are above $100 million, right? And then, the further you go, you can see that, the funding has been growing. And then in 2020, despite COVID, we've seen quite a number of investment happening, right? Next, actually, feel free to ask me any questions. I think this infographic can kind of sum up, but then there are a few topics that I would like to address, especially because we looked into early stage funding. Okay, so aside from the history, we have carried out an industry segmentation over here, looking at the top sector that have been attracting financing across the continent. Obviously, we can see financial technology and clean technology, mainly solar energy here, attracting capital. And then we've seen how health has taken a predominant role in the technology space, in the funding space. It being because of COVID, yes, no, but we've seen a spike in telemedicine, and we've seen a spike in logistics and medical supply chain, which has been obviously is always a positive sign, especially because it's one of the sectors that is really solving a lot of crucial issues across the continent. And then the host is spotlight. Okay, and then we've drilled down into what subsector, right? Like, so within the sector, what are the the products that have been funded the most, and you can see how solar energy and pay as you go, as well as payment, traffic remittances, transfer and remittances, and all this to say that we've seen growth aside from actually the wait, there's two people in the waiting room. Okay, sorry. Aside from solar energy and pay as you go, which go kind of in tandem, right? Utility and payment services and financing services for energy access. Then you can see both B2B and B2C solutions across financial technology. So you have payment, so B2B, B2B2C. Then you have peer-to-peer transfers and remittances, right? And but then you also have pretty growth on the financial API side and digital banking. A lot of startups are growing in the space when trying to bridge interoperability and to improve the flexibility of banks and banking infrastructure, right? So this gives you a bit the total, like the breakdown, where the the countries that have been raising most of the funding here, like what we call the innovation diamond. Meaning Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and then a number of what we call second tier countries, simply because second tier simply because they've been raising a significantly lower amount of funding compared to the first four, right? I'll skip this because this is simply a breakdown of the what I showed you. This funding is history on the month-to-month investment trends, and page 11 actually shows you the difference between the normal funding and the funding when you account for large deals, right? As you can see, like the volumes are significantly different, right? There have been a few months over the course of the year where we've seen a lot of high activity and a lot of announcement, even on average size deals. But then you can see when you add, the big funding, right? You can see this November 2019 proved particularly, vibrant because you had a number of mega deals here, and something that we're really keen on at Brighter, and I think this is one of the main messages that we want to project is the fact that we want to we don't want to drive hype. We really want to drive kind of like criticism around investigating the landscape. So you see that we're adding a whole bunch of like footnotes and just handwritten notes in order for people to really understand what the data is showing, right? So if you see here in 2019, you can say, well, 2019 has seen a lot of funding, right? 2.5, 2.6 billion. But then, most of this funding actually came from, what we call mega deals, right? And this is very important because like the rest means that like there has been $1 billion that has been spread across all the rest of the companies, and then there's been 4 to 7 companies that have raised over $1 billion, right? So you can see how there has been there's a bit of an imbalance in here. There's nothing negative or positive. It's just the fact that 7 companies have raised the amount of that probably like hundreds have in the same year, right? And so it's very important to highlight this because it helps really understand how the composition and nature of capital across the continent is. Moving on, something that we highlighted here is the fact that there are some countries that act as headquarter countries, and for a number of reasons: regulation, startup acts, tax sort of infrastructure, also capital availability. And so you can see like we've split between the headquarters in Africa and the headquarters across Africa, right? So you can see that like the US, the UK, the UAE are top headquarters for companies operating in Africa that are outside of Africa. And then South Africa, Mauritius, and Kenya act as hubs for headquarters for companies that are spread across the continent. So for instance, companies that are headquartered in Kenya usually are active across the region, right? So you can see they might be active across Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, right? Ethiopia, a bit of Zambia and DRC. And then you can see how companies in South Africa, they might be active across the SADC region, and so on and so forth. And something that is striking here is the fact that Nigeria, for instance, is not present. And this kind of like leads to the conversation around there are countries that are particularly not favorable when it comes to setting up a business because of a number of reasons. All countries are trying to step up their infrastructure and their regulatory framework in order to accommodate this. Not everyone is doing it at the same pace. And that's what we really wanted to highlight, right? Especially one of the reasons why we did this is because, many companies raise funding, especially growth stage, and it's very hard to then put onto a map where that company actually belongs, because if a company raises $10 million and a company is active across Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, you cannot just say a company from Kenya raised that amount, because you're leaving out all the companies that have been, all the countries of operation that the company has beyond Kenya. But at the same time, you cannot even split by 3, because like the allocation of funding isn't exactly like 3.3, 3.3, 3.3, right? But it's probably like 7 in Kenya, 2 in Uganda, and 1 in Rwanda to launch a new operation, right? And so our problem there was to highlight the actual distribution of capital. And so what we decided to do was just to allocate like 1 score to each country. And so we highlighted how much the companies that are headquartered in a specific country raised. And then we showed, though, the operations of these companies, because what you wanted to show is like, where are the countries of operation for the companies that have been raising during the year, right? And it's far beyond, just this. And as you can see, like the headquarters are limited to some countries, and there's a pattern in here. And the countries of operations are far spread. And something that I think it's an interesting point to highlight is how companies that are growing in a specific country then tend to expand to the neighboring countries, right? company that expand in Nigeria, they probably expand also to Cameroon and Ghana, or companies that expand. A lot of the companies, we're doing a report on Francophone Africa, right? And we can see that a lot of the companies that are expanding from Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire are actually expanding them to Burkina, to Mali, to Guinea, and so on and so forth. And this is, or Kenya, right? Expanding all around the Eastern region. So this is an interesting pattern, because it actually, when you say in a company in Kenya has raised $10 million and you don't focus on the other countries, you tend to like diminish the actual potential that a company has, especially from a narrative perspective, because then you say, well, Uganda is effectively not producing many companies, but a lot of the companies that were born in Kenya are actually got operation in Uganda, right? So this is the message that for us it was very important to convey. We've already gone through this. Something that I want to discuss over here, the gender distribution, and also like it's probably something that's very interesting for you. Also, I wanted to point out that Brighter is working with the World Bank right now on a gender access to finance report that will be out at the end of May. Be happy to send it to you and share it with your network. But we're doing, and also we'll be actually sharing a survey, actually, by the way. So probably, for business owners of you who've been seeking funding, who haven't been seeking funding, that would be very interesting for us to hear the stories. Like, we're asking a lot of like founder journey, what bottlenecks they found, what type of capital has been sought, what type of capital is needed, and so on and so forth. So obviously, I mean, needless to say, there's a bias towards funding to male founders. There are several reasons for this. There's less female entrepreneurs and female founders involved in the tech space, especially this report isn't about everything, it's about the tech and the green space. There are not, and so even less, even fewer women who are running companies that are in the 10th decile, which means the 10% of the top companies that have raised funding, right, for a cumulative amount of like $600 million, right? And so you can see like this is gone kind of diminishing somehow. This is probably an outlier that there is here, but you can see like the further up you go, the least the participation of women. The way we've gone about doing this research has actually been looking at up to 4 co-founders per company that has raised. And because we have this huge log that is actually open source, so you can see it on the Brighter Intelligence, by way of checking up to 4 co-founders in each company, we've looked at how the overall number of women that are at the head of companies that have raised is lower than the man. I mean, it wasn't rocket science to see, but here, like, we looked at numbers. And then here is the funding funnel, which might be interesting for you. Is the fact that there has been a growth, this funding funnel with the next infographic, early stage support and growing capital availability, looks at how all up to like $50,000 in funding, there's quite a lot of vehicles that are being set up. And then, the funnel takes like another shape, because you can see that there are a few gaps at kind of growth stage when it comes, not growth stage, but more like establishment, market launch level, like in between, I guess, like 100 and 500,000. And then you can see that there are more and more funds that are being set up in the space, where you can see, over $1 million. There are a number of funds that are being set up for growth stage companies, right? So like, they are there to support not idea stage, but companies that are established, that are selling, that are growing, and that they need more capital, right? So in these 2 pages, 18, 19, what you can see is the fact that obviously capital availability has been growing, there has been a couple of interesting pieces in this infographic, in this chart. The steep growth of seed funding, so the steep growth in availability of early stage funding, but also the steep growth in Series B. And Series B, this means that there have been quite a few companies that have been actually scaling largely across the continent. So like the Series B is that, sweet spot between like 10 and probably $50 million, that companies that are pretty solid already, established maybe already across a few countries, they get an injection of capital to scale across the continent, right? So one of these is like Daystar Power. They got a Series B, like $38 million. We've seen a number of Series B, like Flutterwave has seen Series B on the last few years, right? And this has been, I think, very interesting element, because it shows that there is growth across the continent and there is consolidation across the continent, right? And then finally, like on page 19, what you can see is there has been a growth in the availability of what we call the early stage support system, right? So there are a lot of different types of vehicles, like venture builders, which means they help with talent and business development, not necessarily with funding, syndicates, accelerator programs, and so on and so forth, that provide some degree of funding or support to early stage entrepreneurs, and then in-kind support. So we're seeing more and more like corporates that are entering the space and that are supporting entrepreneurs with software infrastructure. Amazon is doing it, Facebook is doing it, Google is doing it, Oracle is doing it, Liquid is doing it. So we're seeing a lot of companies, especially in tech space, that are supporting companies in by way of providing that capital or infrastructure, and this is happening all across the continent. And these programs, the first map shows like where these organizations are kind of like originating from. So you have like from China, you have like organizations like Future Hub, or Japan. You have a number of early stage investors that are coming out, and so on and so forth. Where are we at? Okay, this is a bit of a clickbaity infographic towards the end. It looks at we looked at about 70 companies that are in that sweet spot of between 10, having raised between 10 and $99 million. So large companies who haven't hit that $100 million in total fundraise, but that are probably like the next in line to raise funding. And actually, like if you want to look at this, we've seen Flutterwave just raised 170 million. Who else? We've seen Aerobotics just raised another like 17 million, if I'm not wrong, at the beginning of the year. And then you had who did just raise? I didn't say the Daystar Power, right? Raised another like $38 million. So you can see like even between these companies in the last few months, there has been a reshuffling already, right? So these are the companies that are likely to gain traction in the next 12 to 24 months. And when it comes to like big chunks of funding, so I think these are the companies that need to be people need to keep an eye on. But yeah, so I think this is enough. I've been talking for I don't even know. But I'd be happy to hear your questions, your stories, anything really.
Yeah, thank you for sharing with us, Dario. I think it was really insightful, and I'm sure I have some questions, but I'd love to open the floor to all these ladies. Do you guys have any questions for Dario about the report or about what Brighter does? Maybe let me get started with one question. So, Dario, you're talking about these companies that are massive, right? I saw Hitch there, and I know that's like one of the major ride supporters in Morocco. And a lot of the women that are joining us are founders of pretty small companies, or maybe they're working on working for a bigger company or something like this. But how does understanding this data and learning about the changes in the ecosystem impact the smaller level entrepreneurs, and why should they really like look into the trends of the ecosystem and what's going on there?
So I think looking at the growth factors across the continent is always a gamble. At Brighter, we're gonna take like the tangential way to answer it. But at Brighter, we've been looking at indicators such as when they founded, like who the investors are, what sector all these companies are. And I say this because the journey, the trajectory for growth isn't the same everywhere. That we've seen that there are some hotspots in terms of sectors and products that are growing, picking up. And I think this also by way of being tapping into into a market that is there, it's ready, it's ripe for innovation and supply. And if they have that good product and the good network, then they tend to scale. We haven't crafted the recipe for growth or for access to capital. Especially because we're seeing that a lot of the companies that are coming up with like new investors that come out of nowhere, there are investors that are American investors that just like decide today to look at the continent, and they do all of this in low key, and then these companies are the ones that usually tend to attract this type of funding. And so what you see is something that I'm really realizing, especially because we track funding and we track investors, is that we don't anticipate these people, because the dynamic for this is, I am Dario and I have $100 million to deploy in my fund, and I want to start investing in Africa. I go after the solid companies. I don't talk about my Africa strategy and all of that. If anything, I do it after. And then one day you wake up in the morning and there's a $50 million raise from each, right, or from this and that. And so it's the fact, and what have we gathered from this? The fact that there's a lot of interest every day from new investors, that it's unforeseen, and this is driven by the fact that there are more and more success stories across the continent, right? And there are more opportunities to tap into. There are not necessarily opportunities that are hot, or like opportunities that everyone talks about, maybe solar energy and all of that. Like some of the companies that are raising funding right now are doing a payment system for transport, like data sharing for traffic, and all of that, and stuff that you're like, I didn't think this would be like what it's attracting. Obviously, you have the big companies that are coming into the continent, and the implication for the local players here is the fact that obviously they start competing with the big guys, right? They start competing with Hitch, they start competing with Uber, start competing with Glovo, with Bolt. But then at the same time, the flip side is the fact that this acts as a validation point for this organization, right? And so the fact itself, then there's an Uber that is, Bolt just like raised 20 million just to expand across Africa, right? And 20 million is big funding, but it's not necessarily big funding for Bolt, because they've already raised 10 times, 15 times more than that, right? And so like this is actually acting as a threat for local companies, but it's also acting as a validation point for local companies, and it's also acting as an exit possibility for local companies. Because obviously, like local companies are like, I have 20,000 riders on my app in in Abidjan or Casablanca, and these guys just come in with 100 million, I can have a $5 to $10 million exit. And so these represent also like a, you know, a point of validation and an opportunity for local entrepreneurs. You know, we've tried to, like, you know, when we do the sector segmentation on funding, we look at product, not just the overarching sector. So we have identified, you know, payments as B2B payment as like a big chunk, or like solar energy, B2B solar energy is a big chunk. Digital banking is another big chunk. But there's more and more that is happening, especially because more, like one of the latest projects that we did was an emerging market strategy for an AI company, right? And what we were asked to do is identify companies that are actually operating in this space. And this is a new opportunity that maybe 2 years ago wasn't there. And then this company maybe is entering the continent with $1 billion in infrastructure funding, right?
Yeah.
Does this answer your question, or have I just like gone into?
No, I think that's really, definitely you were hitting on some points even that I had other questions about. And I think Crescens has a question, so I want to move to her, but I want to highlight that you were talking about mobile payments, solar and B2B banking, because I think these, like, just seeing those trends are what are going to affect these smaller level entrepreneurs. So that's really important. But I want to move to Crescens so that she can ask her question.
Hello.
Hi.
Good evening again.
Same to you.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm not good in English, but I try to.
What's your first language? If it's French, it's possible.
No problem. I try. I'm very concerned by providing two women who started their business before starting their business, and I suppose to provide other topics like gender equality, like GBV prevention in the business, like leadership, etc. And I have a question. I want to know how you provide the support to women who start their business, their small business. Thank you.
Okay, so Brighter itself doesn't provide support, but we're tracking this. Also, we're doing quite a bit of work on gender biases when it comes to funding and gender-based biases and the funding space. And we're seeing that there's quite a lot of work that has been done at the level of female-focused funds. There's quite a lot of funds that are being set up in the order of millions, like, but also from like the IFC, you know, the International Finance Corporation. Also, there have been a few private sector funds that have been set up in Nigeria and in Francophone Africa that are focused on women. Obviously, this is like it's a systemic bias, right? We're not talking about just like, oops, you know, we didn't happen to fund women, we'll remedy, right? It doesn't work like that. It's something that is a bit more embedded in the way companies are set up, in cultural biases. So it's not straightforward to say like, how are we getting, you know, we're gonna get women out of funding slump, right? But obviously we are seeing that there is movements around this. We are seeing that there's a lot of like STEM courses that are being promoted for women to be integrated into sort of systems that, you know, that allow them not to be kind of scapegoated or accused for studying or for working in science and in technology. And I think this is very important. But obviously, as I said at the beginning, like this is something that is an overarching structure of society where we've seen far less funding going to women. And I think the way out is, you know, programs like Dual Tech and programs like the ones that we're seeing from the IFC, from in generally like better legislation and better like regulatory framework around integrating women, and also cultural kind of like cultural movements and the ability to be exposed to what is happening beyond Africa when it comes to opportunities for women is very important. But very practically for you, I would say I would go after, you know, I've given a bit of a, like a philosophical overview to this, but I think like very practical as for you, there's a lot of funding that is being made available at both early and later stage for female entrepreneurs. And also a lot of mentorship that is happening. Like there are a number of women that are making their hours available. I think yesterday I saw what was it? It was a showcase of like female successful female entrepreneurs and investors, like providing their office hours to speak to you know, early stage founders. And it's often like that. Like it's often the case of finding someone who can help you like prioritize, who can help you develop some of the basic business skills that then you could implement, and it can help you say like, don't focus on this, focus on product, focus on, you know, and it's very important. And I'm seeing a lot of growth in this in this space. There's a lot of awareness. There's a lot of African women who are succeeding and who are giving back. But again, I'll be happy to share our findings the more we keep producing them, and after this report will come out, because we try to showcase some of the opportunities that are out there for female entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
Oh, finally, actually, last year we did release this report. In fact, I'll send it to you, which was the like version 1.0 of what we're doing this year. But we had this map, which was women support ecosystem map, and included like foundations and investors and hubs, and there were like about 200 organizations in there. I do recommend you take a look at it, because it could be of help very tangibly. Maybe I have it. Let me check. If anyone has any questions, I'll be trying to see if I can find it.
For sure, yeah, and we'll share all of your reports as well on our channel, just so they can see the data that you guys have collected. But I think you made a great point about mentorship, and our first session actually was with Yemi Carey, and we talked about mentorship. So if any of you ladies missed that session last week, you can check out the discussion on our YouTube channel, catch up those points that she had about mentorship. But as Dario said, very much linked to the acquisition of funding. So we shared about 5 different programs that are currently accepting mentees. So if you're looking for a mentor, we can send that out again to you guys, and that might be a great entry point to securing funding.
So yeah, I mean, there are very practical ways. Like you can see, like this is our first one that we did last year, State of Play. And if you go all the way, I mean, this is still pretty relevant. But obviously, the one that we're doing this year is going to be like 4 times as big than this. So there's key stakeholders actively supporting women in Africa, and this is like I doubt there would be Dual Tech last year. It was probably like we didn't add it, but we will be adding it this year. But as you can see, like there are quite a number of organizations that are supporting women. This could be helpful for you. And yeah, so I'm happy to share it. I mean, it's on our website, so you can download it. But this gives you like a good snapshot what the organizations are based. But yeah, so I hope this will help.
Yeah, definitely we'll share that report, especially. I think there's some good information in it for them. And frankly, if any of them are supporting their own organizations that support female entrepreneurs, it sounds like Crescents might be one of those women. So that way we can send that information along to you as well for the next map.
Sure. Also, like, please feel free to like add me and my team to LinkedIn, because like our team is doing quite a lot of work on it. And it's and 2 or 3 people in our team, especially our head of research, Lisa, is actually driving this project also with the World Bank. We'd be happy to to hear story, also like consider you for the survey, because we'll be sending out the survey to like hundreds of people.
Okay.
So like getting to know the organization before we even start to be even better. So feel free to add me. Like I don't know if you want to share, I can, or my team, like whatever. In case you wanted some more insights. Anyone else got any question?
Last chance. There you go, Irene. Go ahead. You just have to unmute.
Again, let me make sure that you are hearing from me.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello. My suggestion. I'll put it in a through chat. It is a strategic partnership with my organization. Like capacity building before starting their business.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Kristen, I'd be happy to speak, and also especially my team would be happy to speak. We honestly we constantly work on getting to know more players. So like, please, I'm telling all of you to let us know, because Reuters is very much a research organization. So we want to get to know people, and we want to see how in our report we can showcase them if they're active, because our report gets very pretty far when it comes to coverage, and I think this could be of help for many, or like even just like to have a bit of exposure to to the international community. Also, we're working across emerging markets, so this could be of help. Irene, sorry, please, what were you saying?
Okay. Hello, everybody. Let me hope you are hearing me clearly. My question is, like most of the women, so many women wish to start their businesses, and they are facing the challenges of getting capital or mentorship or other things that can make them progress in their business idea that they have, whether they are innovative or they are making something new. But there are a lot of organizations that providing funds, but the problem is most of the funds are available by now most are focusing on the technology. So I want to know, like, what would you advise all women or other people to make sure that they're making their business, they're starting their business in technology, or you advise them to start the business and search the way they can incorporate their business ideas or the startups with the business, with technology? I mean, because most of the funds are available are focusing on technology businesses. Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know if I got your question right, but like the way I literally have 1 minute, and then I actually have to like have a hard stop. I need to dash back. But And feel free to send me as many questions that you have, and I'll be happy to respond also in via email. But so if you want to collect questions later, feel free. I never like suggest setting up a business based on the funding opportunity there is in that. Like I don't think that's how you end up getting the funding. I think you usually have your business. It has some degree of meaning, at least. It doesn't have to be successful, but you need to like show that it works, or that has the potential to work, and then the funding availability, it would only just be like that conducive and the lubricant that would help the business grow, and not the other way around. Right? Not that there's funding and say, oh, then I'll set up a business in this direction. Right? It doesn't usually work like that. It's usually, I think, in my opinion, like you start tackling the problem even in your tiny niche, and then if that picks up, you might look after for funding opportunities, which usually are there. Yeah, but you just need to prove that you're able to maintain and sustain what you're building. Everyone, I actually need to run. I had this like very important call that has been put right now. I wasn't expecting it. Literally been put there. So
Thank you so much, Dario. We're really, really happy to have you here, and definitely we'll collect any other questions. So thank you, ladies, for joining us, and we really appreciate all the information that you gave to us today. So
no problem.
Have a great night.
Feel free to add, team and everyone, and then if you have any questions, please reach out.
For sure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.